Hello everyone, welcome to the Peter Purves podcast. And today's pod is certainly a little bit different from the ones that I've done before, because it isn't me on my own, it's not me with just one guest. In fact, today I have three very wonderful guests, because my subject matter is going to be all about the wonderful work that's been done and is continuing to be done by the charitable trust Film is Fabulous. Now, as many people will know, Film is Fabulous was responsible for recovering two missing episodes of the 12-part Dalek Master Plan from Doctor Who. Now, these had not been seen for 60 years since they were first transmitted. Never sold, never repeated. And so this was quite a bonus discovery amongst a rather large discovery of several thousand cans of film, which had been collected by a film collector who really did not necessarily know what he had. He wasn't particularly interested in the content of the cans of their film, only that he collected film in cans, whatever their subject. But to Doctor Who fans, of course, this was really part of the Holy Grail, and for me too. Now, I'm forever indebted to Film is Fabulous for restoring and making public, via the BBC, who made the original programmes, two more of the 29 missing episodes in which I appeared back in 1965 and 1966. So I'm sure you can imagine how pleased I am to welcome three of the major players in Film is Fabulous as my guests today. They are Sue Malden, former head of the BBC Broadcast Archives.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Sue. Professor Justin Smith at De Montfort University in Leicester.
Hello.
And of course, the Chief Executive Officer of the charity, John Franklin.
Hello.
Welcome to you all. John, I'm going to start with you, put you right on the spot. Tell me what Film is Fabulous is about. What is its premise for being?
Well, that's a very good question, Peter. And of course, like all things and all businesses, all charities, you start out with one idea, and over a period of time, which is just over 3 years for Film is Fabulous, things evolve and become something more than you perhaps originally envisaged.
Yeah.
When I really had the idea of Film is Fabulous and coerced Sue and Justin to come on board and to help me, the idea was really to try and persuade elderly film collectors to make a list of their films and to put that list via a codicil into their will, so that when inevitably they sadly passed away, someone knew, whether it was their family or the executives of their estate, what they wanted to happen with their legacy, a collection which they'd amassed over most, if not all, of their adult life. Because that hadn't happened through the period of COVID, and thousands and thousands of films were lost because people had no lists, left no instructions, and indeed, many didn't even have wills.
I suppose, is it because that the relatives of the person who was done the collecting and has passed, is it because those relatives aren't interested in that hobby, so it's just junk to them?
Well, it is that to a point. Also, many of the relatives were concerned about the provenance, the source of the films, because a lot of elderly collectors, and without going into all of the details, hadn't paid directly for those films. They'd diverted them from various sources, whether it was from the skips outside the BBC or from distribution centres when cinemas were throwing away their film. You understand, there was a good deal of concern by the families that they might end up being accused of theft
Yes.
or something untoward. So they were quite happy in many ways for the houses to be cleared when their loved ones passed away, and for all this old junk, the films that were sat in 4 or 5 different rooms, to be disposed of so that they could get to the end goal, which for most families was clearing the property, selling the property, and then moving on with their life. Now, when we started, it was a very simple goal. But quite frankly, it has evolved into us doing an enormous amount of work. And of course, in conjunction with De Montfort University, with whom we have a partnership, pursuing a lot of educational ends, because we feel that the material that we're recovering as part of these collections has an enormous cultural heritage element to it. And that's why we've added all of the items to do with education. Justin obviously can tell you more about this, but it's become something much more than we ever envisaged at the outset.
Well, that's a fascinating introduction to Justin as well at this point, because he is a professor of cinema, media,
and television history.
Yes, television history in particular. Welcome, Justin. Tell me what you actually do. Now, I don't mean what you do in your courses, but this whole business of collecting detail about film and everything else, it complements what John was just saying about finding the films. Do tell me about your involvement, how it started and where you got to with it.
Yes, well, I joined De Montfort University as Professor of Cinema and Television History in 2017, but actually the Cinema and Television History group there was established back in 2010. In fact, it was launched by the celebrated director Ken Loach.
Oh, really? Yes.
Who originates from Nuneaton, but not many miles away from us.
You know, my first wife, Gilly Fraser, was in his very first television major play, Up the Junction.
Fantastic.
Wow. Yeah.
Small world. So cinema and television history is very much, what our research is about, particularly British cinema and television history, and have a number of colleagues who've published very widely and researched different aspects of cinema and television history in this country. For example, one of our fellow trustees, Lorraine Porter, for many years ran with the British Film Institute the annual British Silent Film Festival.
Oh, wow.
We have colleagues who research the history of film societies, the film societies movement in this country. My colleagues have written histories of, for example, the British Bee movie over many years. And I myself have been involved and led, a number of projects on different aspects of post-war British cinema and television history. And our approaches really are twofold. They're rooted in archival methods.
Yeah.
That is finding, factual sources of information about how film and television was made, who the, its progenitors were, who and how things came into being and what kind of impact they had at the time. But there's another aspect to that as well, which is oral history, and where those creative talents from the past are very much still with us, and talk with them and recover their memories. And so it's a dual kind of approach of consulting archives and talking to people, really, that underpins a very sort of evidence-based kind of film and television history that we do at De Montfort University. So that essentially is the background of our environment there. But
yes,
part of that is that Cinema and Television History, or CATH, as it is called for short, has, since its beginnings in 2010, acquired a number of paper archives, mainly paper archives. That is, papers, contracts, production files, memorabilia associated with film, and so on. And our special collections department in the library at De Montfort University has a major base there for the hosting of that archival material and its maintenance. So just to give you quickly some examples, we have the script archive from Hammer Films. The horror pioneers from the 50s, 60s and 70s. We have the Tony Hancock Appreciation Society archive.
I joined that.
We've got the Sir Norman Wisdom.
Wow.
We've also got the papers of the celebrated screenwriter and adapter of classic novels, Andrew Davis.
Oh, yes.
As well. And these have formed the basis of various projects and lots of work we've done, PhDs that students have undertaken, drawing on these materials. So this is very much our sort of bread and butter.
Yeah. So absolutely fascinating. We can get into more of that in just a moment. I'm going to bring Sue in now because, Sue and I, our paths crossed 13 years ago.
Yes,
when you
not
were
very long ago.
Not that long ago. You were head of the archive department. I remember coming down. It was somewhere in Ealing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brentford.
Which I thought was the most wonderful setup, and you were doing a fantastic job with this brilliantly set up archive. I know it's no longer there; it's moved on. It's become something else, which is a great shame. But at that time, we made a film together about missing episodes, because one had been found, and we went on to various things, discovering what happened to those. That was a fascinating job for you, and I think that you are responsible in more ways than one for making it possible for me to see myself in the few episodes, the 18, now 19 episodes of Doctor Who that do exist. Because tell me the story about finding a mass that was about to go to a skip.
Oh, wow. Well, we're finding so close to many skips. I think probably what you're referring to is Villiers House. And to recap, to contextualize things, I was appointed to be the first BBC television archive selector. I was the first post holder, so there was no real defined job description, rather a lot of significant principles that one was supposed to work to and achieve. So I worked like Billio for the first 6 months, establishing criteria, policies, ways of working, blah, blah, blah. And I sort of then sat back after about 6 months and thought, and why are there so many gaps in the archive? Because like most people, I think I presumed a program was broadcast, taken off the machine and put on the shelves. And I was horrified when I did a lot of research prior to my appointment as archivist on something called 40 Years, celebrating the BBC's 40th anniversary. I was so horrified when I was being asked for what were seen to be crucially important programs, and they weren't there.
Yes.
So when I became the selector, I thought, well, now's my chance to try and find out, why are these gaps there? And, what can anybody do about it? So I started making lists of certain programs, or a particular program, which I won't name yet. And I checked how many had been broadcast, how many were in the archive, therefore, how many were lost, missing, disappeared, whatever words we want to use.
Stolen, forgotten.
Exactly. So, and I thought I'd then find out, why had they disappeared? Why weren't they kept? Why weren't they there? And at the same time, one of my roles was to work as closely as possible with the British Film Institute, who had just established what they called the National Film and Television Archive. And I worked with their television curator, a guy called Paul Madden, who was producing a book called Keeping Television Alive, which was a listing of television programs that were held in the British Film Institute. And I was going through the titles and checking them, making sure they were BBC ones, etc., when I noticed they had 2 episodes of a particular series that were not in the BBC archive. And I thought, how's that happened? I don't understand this. So I phoned up my contacts and said, where'd you get those Doctor Who's from? And he explained he'd met a very nice lady at a dinner party or some television type function who worked for BBC Enterprises.
Yes.
And she was based in Villiers House. And one of her jobs was to go through the process of making copies of BBC programmes for BBC Enterprises to license and sell abroad.
Yes.
And in that process, she also had to make sure that when the rights had all been used up by the foreign broadcaster, that the original programmes had to be returned or destroyed. And if they were destroyed, they had to sign a certificate of destruction.
Yes.
More importantly, many people returned them. And this is where the skip comes in. I'd arranged to visit this lady to check out exactly what she did and what was there and what sort of catalogue had she got and so on, when I found a whole load of the said series had been returned for destruction, i.e. for the skip. And I had with me a guy called Ian Levine, who's very well known to Doctor Who fans and is insatiably enthusiastic about Doctor Who. So he was looking at every can on the floor of this lady's office and dispatch area. I said, oh my God, there's Doctor Who's here. There's Doctor Who's. So we suddenly really perked up and said, Enid, those can't go to the skip. We need to check whether they're missing from the main archive. And if they are, we need to take them back in. And that was the beginning of a lovely long time of cooperation with Enid Mawson, who let me know about every program they'd copied. She had a catalogue of them. And I could mark the catalogue saying these programs are important. They're missing from the main archive.
Yes.
If they get returned, or if the certificate for destruction goes out, you must let me know so I can take them back into the main archive.
Yeah.
And they're not going to go into a skip. So that was the story of the skips.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I remember you saying that there was quite a collection, wasn't there? Just about ready to be dumped, which is a great shame. Awful. Villiers House, you mentioned there several times. That was where they stored the old 2-inch tapes.
Not.
Isn't that correct?
No. Villiers House was more. It was over Ealing Broadway Tube Station.
Yes, I remember where it was.
So it was sort of set of offices with a store and a dispatch area. And it was mainly a store for BBC Enterprises copies for distribution to foreign broadcasters.
Yes.
Most of that at the time was on film rather than tape.
Yes. So they'd already been transferred from the original
they'd done the
2-inch
transfer,
tapes.
maybe at Television Centre or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was most of their customers, broadcasters, were slightly behind the BBC's technology, and they were still broadcasting film recordings. So a lot of these were film recordings made of the original dreaded 2-inch tape.
Let's move on to how you three gel together, because you obviously have a rapport, and it's great to have you all here at the same time. But your understanding, your own skills meld beautifully together. What you all have, they are important elements. Without all of those elements, I don't think you could be doing what you're doing.
Well, that's very nice to say, Peter. I think we all really appreciate that. That's very kind. And we do gel together. It's great. I was first approached by John after I'd spoken on a panel at a Doctor Who conference somewhere in Milton Keynes, I think. And he explained his concerns about film collectors and everything that John has just outlined at the start of this, much of which I was blissfully unaware of.
Yes.
And our idea was to get together to give a presentation sort of thing with the help of Justin in the Phoenix at Leicester, to tell or inform collectors that it was important that they made lists of what they had.
Yeah.
And being a librarian archivist, I'm a very good list maker. I'm very enthusiastic about lists.
Were the collectors, I mean, how do you find the collectors, for example? Is there an organization that they are part of, or are they all indiscriminate individuals spread around the country and having no contact with each other? I suspect it's more of a community, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think John is the best person to answer that.
Yeah.
He's only a film collector from Leicester, you know.
Thank you, Sue.
It's okay.
Well, the truth is, Peter, that's really my role in Film is Fabulous. I'm a long-standing film collector of almost 40 years. I know a lot of people in the UK's film collecting community, and that's really why I sort of got the ball rolling with Film is Fabulous, because during COVID, a number of people contacted. I mean, I would get a call at the weekend. Hello, John, it's Sue. Dad's died. What should we do with his films? And of course, there was no infrastructure. There was nothing set up. I spoke to the BFI. I spoke with the BBC. They had limited resources. And to be honest, that wasn't a priority for them. So that's when I went out to a number of people to say, look, I think it's wrong that all these films are being thrown away and we should do something. So initially, as I said, the idea was to encourage elderly film collectors to make lists, put the lists of their films in their wills. But the sad truth of the matter is many of the collectors were so ill that they couldn't lift the films, they couldn't do the work themselves. So we took on much of that responsibility. And indeed, the people that were very keen to take advantage of the service we were offering were those families where the collector had passed away. And they said, look, I've got a whole house full of film. Can you come and take it all away so we can sell it? And we'll leave it with you and you can do what you want with it. And really, the first property we went to, we removed the collection, thousands of films, and there were missing episodes of The Likely Lads, Sykes, some Steptoes. I mean, and it dawned on all of us, I think, at that point, the importance that our work would take, the fact that collectors had these absolute cultural treasures, and we had to find a way of preserving them. So in answer to your question, that's my role. I'm the conduit to the collectors. No two collectors are the same. They are in different places of the country with different enthusiasms, different setups, and of course their own well-being, health and ability determines what we need to do. And the truth of the matter is, until this point in time, we've focused on what is the priority rather than what collections might have the most interesting items. If I know that there's a collection of thousands of films, but it's safe, it's secure, then I can leave that irrespective of what it might have within it. and I can focus on that collection that I need to move in 2 weeks. Otherwise, the items will end up being thrown away and they'll be lost forever.
It's a scary situation, and it is rather tragic. And particularly, as I said at the beginning, that many of the collectors aren't interested in the content. If they aren't interested in the content, what is their pleasure? What do they get out of it?
Well, you are correct to a degree. Many collectors have particular enthusiasms. So the gentleman who was the collector who sadly passed away and had 6 episodes of Doctor Who in his collection, including the 2 episodes of the Master Plan that were missing, his enthusiasms were, well, transport, the rail network and canals, and he had hundreds of home-made films where he went and filmed with his Bolex camera at different points on the canal network. That was his enthusiasm. Now, another collector who he knew may have passed away, and so the gentleman acquired his collection because as the community gets smaller, film collections get larger, because Fred leaves his films to Bert, and then Bert passes away and Harry gets all of, you understand. So this is why films get passed on. And not every film in every collection is of particular interest to every collector, aside from the fact that it's film. And that's one of the key things to remember. So the gentleman with the Doctor Who's had boxes of films that he'd probably never looked at because they were of no real interest to him.
Yes. I want to bring Justin back in now for a moment, because I want to ask you about the various equipment, antique equipment you have at the university. But first, I wanted to ask you how you became involved with Film is Fabulous.
Like Sue, John approached me in summer 2023 and set out the situation, the seriousness of it, and asked for help from De Montfort University. And I think he was aware of our established track record in British cinema and television history, and some of the paper archives that we have, but also was aware of our relationship with the Phoenix Cinema in Leicester. Is a partnership that has been in existence for a number of years, such that our students used to mount their own film festivals at the professional film festivals for the public at the Phoenix Cinema.
Oh, how good is that? Yes.
Taught all gave our lectures and had screenings for the students in the mornings before the cinema opened to the public. And so the relationship with the Phoenix was very important. So that was the first thing, because John wanted to put on an event at the Phoenix. And indeed, as you well know, we've subsequently hosted a number of events there, which you've been part of. But the other thing that we have in our special collections is storage space and atmospherically controlled conditions that are suitable for storing a whole range of items, including film. Now, what quickly became apparent in the narrative that John has given you about how we began taking film collections in is that we needed to establish a sort of workflow, and we were able to procure the services of De Montfort University was able to provide a small amount of funding. Special collections were able to provide some space. A doctoral student with a PhD in museums and archives, although he had no particular specialism in film, to do some cataloguing work for us. And so we set up a pilot study. And really that was to kind of work out and establish a workflow of what we would do with the films that we were taking in, how we would examine them, the information that we would collect about them, both from the film can and from the film itself, and from contextual research that we might do, and how we might document that. And we sought advice from Sue about the international standards, the Fiat standards for film and television archiving, which we employed. And we sort of developed a methodology, if you like, which we have come to call a kind of triage service. In a sense, it is assessing a film when it arrives, and then what happens to it next thereafter, because we're not in a position, and nor are we interested in being an archive that keeps film. We're primarily a service as Film is Fabulous. And so that was an important thing. And what Special Collections had then was fairly rudimentary in terms of film handling, but through the collections that we took in, particularly an early collection from a deceased industry professional and collector in Leicester, was some equipment. So we inherited a 16mm hand winding bench. We inherited a Steenbeck, and the space and the resources that are available there in Special Collections therefore became ideal for us to use as a workshop, if you like, in order to assess the collections that we take in. Subsequently, as John has indicated, as we've received more and more inquiries and film collections, as it were, are queuing up at our door, we've expanded and taken on external off-site storage facilities, both in Leicester and in London, to enable us to manage this workflow. But Special Collections at DMU is essentially still the place where we do that finer examination that some films entail more than others.
Yes, I can understand that, and I should think
your question was right, because a lot of collectors do have a lot of film equipment as well.
Yes,
and that's not directly the interest of Film is Fabulous any more than we need equipment to replay the film and so on. So that the examples that Justin gave have been very useful for the collection. But John has been instrumental with his connections with the film collecting world of helping to place some of the equipment we have found in collectors' homes with other collectors, or possibly museums, or possibly auction houses to sell.
yes.
But the equipment is not a primary concern of ours, but we can't ignore it because it's part of the collector's world. I mean, John might want to add a bit more to that.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's the case, and I'll come back to you on that, John. But just remembering when we filmed together those 13 years ago, it was quite lucky that there was still in existence the kind of equipment that was needed to play the actual recordings that we had on that occasion. And without someone having preserved those, I mean, you'd never be able to, unless someone would rebuild them. There's nothing to play the actual films and tapes on. Yeah,
no, you're quite right, because the level or the amount of obsolescence that's built into the film and television business is phenomenal. I remember somebody telling me once that as the videotape formats changed, there would come a point when the format was changing during the time it took to run a 60-minute tape, So it is important, and a lot of archives have to try and maintain the equipment to replay.
Yes.
And collectors also need the equipment to replay their content if they're interested enough to look at it. As John has already said, many of them are just happy to collect the stuff, as I'm forever saying.
Yes.
Without even replaying it, but many other collectors do need equipment to replay.
Yes, actually, John, you were telling me earlier on a previous occasion when we met that some of the collectors get totally involved with the actual projection of their films and lacing the film, doing all the things that you have to do to project it. They couldn't necessarily care less what's on the screen.
You're correct. So for some collectors, and remember what I said, every collector is different, every collection is different. For some collectors, it's the art of projecting film that's of interest to them, much in the way that there are those people that want to go onto a steam engine and just shovel coal into a 16 by 16 inch hole. I mean, that's all they're interested in. So again, I'm not in any way judgmental as to what a collector should or shouldn't be. What we do is try to be empathetic, understand each collection on its merits, whether it's a collection that has, well, lots of memorabilia associated with it, and then find a way of managing that collection and then disposing of it, primarily disposing of it on behalf of the family. And this is important. We're not an archive, and the money that's generated through the sale of the films, the equipment, and any memorabilia, because a lot of posters and books and magazines are worth thousands, that goes directly to the family. And that's been one of the things that has unlocked collections. That's why I've been able to get access to film collections that other organizations haven't. We are dealing with people transparently. We're totally honest. We let them know, right, this is what we think this is worth. We're going to go to X auction house that specialize in film. They will value it. They will manage the sale, and you'll get all of the money less their commission. We don't charge anything.
I suppose building the trust is a difficult thing, and you've obviously managed that to a large extent, because I know that following the opening event, which I was lucky enough to attend at the Phoenix in Leicester, when you announced, surprisingly to me, that one episode first had been discovered and then hit me with the second one. I mean, that was a wonderful piece of deception, which I was so thrilled by. It was absolutely wonderful. Following that initial announcement and publicity, what's the response been like?
Well, we certainly had an enormous response. Yes, hundreds of millions of people across the world saw all of the media coverage. And to give you an idea, we attended, Justin and I and a small team attended a film collecting event earlier this year, at which we were a dealer selling some of the films on behalf of the families that we had dealt with. I was approached by the organizer of the event, and he said, I've got a family here, John, that want to present you with something. I said, oh, really? Okay. So I went round to the main hall where they had screenings of films going on, grabbed the microphone, and a member of the family gave the film to the organizer. And it was the original 35mm film inserts of the Beatles on top of the pops, recorded on the 19th of March, 1964. And that was all down to trust. They knew that we would do right by them. That item has been returned to the BBC. We've got some special announcements surrounding it very soon, so I won't say any more. But trust is so important, Peter.
Which brings me very nicely to, what can people do to help?
Well, people can donate. So first of all, when we established the charitable trust last October, we set up a payment system through the website, and people responded tremendously. I mean, we had just so many people making multiple donations, it has to be said. And that was essential. And I will touch on this very briefly. We've acquired some collections. We had to acquire the collection in which the Doctor Who's that we returned, were found. And that wouldn't have been possible without the generosity of our followers and supporters. So that made a tangible difference. And of course, just putting things into storage, paying for vehicles to go and collect things, ensuring members of staff, doing the basic things that we have to do costs money. So the donations that we've received to this point have been absolutely vital. We've just launched a Patreon platform account. That's going very, very well. We are making material that we find, little stories, behind the scene vignettes, all the sorts of things that our followers like to see and hear. We've been making that available because it helps people forge closer links with Film is Fabulous. And I think it's obvious that we're doing this not for monetary reasons. We're doing it because we think it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
And down the line, we hope that we'll become, because we've applied, a registered charity that will unlock additional funding, we believe. So everything is being done to put the infrastructure in place to save more films. And I just want to say this finally. The next 5 years are going to be absolutely vital, because without putting a finer point on it, those people that worked in television and film in the 50s and 60s that grew up with those industries in the UK will inevitably pass away. And we've got to find a way of preserving their collections. And that's our goal. Simple.
What a perfect way to end this conversation.
Thanks.
I'll post all the details of your Patreon page on my Patreon page, where there'll also be more from this four-way chat. So let me just say, John, Justin, Sue, a very big thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. It was a pleasure.
And if you're contemplating joining the Film is Fabulous Patreon page, do think about the Peter Purves podcast. Every Patreon I get helps to keep these pods coming. I love doing them, and I hope you enjoy listening to them. So, till the very next time, from my co-producer Mikey Smith and me, adieu.